Hello, my name is Jahari Nelson, a senior biology major at Mogas University, and today Group 8 will be presenting genetic risk scores for birth weight in South Asian and European populations. Based on the paper, babies of South Asian and European ancestry show similar associations with genetic risk score for birth weight despite smaller size of South Asian newborns, authored by Suraj S. Nugmatham et al. Why is birth weight important? Birth weight is a key indicator of intrauterine growth and neonatal health, and is influenced by two main things: fetal genetics, which is the direct effect, and maternal genetics, which is the indirect effect. Low birth weight is common in South Asians and linked to higher risk of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. South Asia has a high burden of low birth weight and higher cardiometabolic risk at lower BMI compared to Europeans. However, genetic studies on birth weight have mostly focused on Europeans. This led us to the key question: do the same genetic variants influence birth weight and later health in South Asians? This study had two main objectives: to compare the effects of fetal and maternal genetic scores on birth weight in South Asians versus Europeans, and to investigate whether these genetic scores influence childhood growth and adult cardiometabolic traits in South Asians.
Hi, my name is Kiara Smith, and we'll now be moving on to the methodology. They collected a range of phenotypic data, which included birth measurements such as weight, length, and head circumference. They later followed up, including detailed assessments of cardiometabolic health, including blood pressure, glucose levels, insulin, and lipids. For genotyping, they used high quality arrays, including the Affirmatrix genome-wide human SNP arrays and the Illumina Infinium arrays. Strict quality control was ensured by eliminating individuals with genotyping call rates below 95%. So they focused on the 196 SNPs associated with birth weight, from a previous GWAS, which allowed them to calculate weighted genetic scores from both fetal and maternal genetics. This was done using the following formula right here, the weighted genetic score. The statistical analysis included linear regression models with birth weight z-scores as a dependent variable adjusting on the child's sex and gestational age. A meta-analysis across cohorts was performed to combine the results. In terms of power calculations, over 99% power was estimated to detect associations with the fetal genetic score and 98% with the maternal genetic score, which is crucial for understanding the genetic basis of birth weight and its long-term impacts. And finally, to account for the multiple testing and significant threshold that was set, they set it at a p is greater than 0.001 to ensure robustness in the findings.
My name is Madison Joseph, and these are the results for the genetic risk factors for birth weight article. The study outline consists of these things here. So first off, the population cohorts, which consist of South Asian babies and European babies. The next thing is the genetic study, which is obtaining genetic risk scores for birth weight. And the way they did that was to use statistics to compare connections and associations between genetic risk scores and birth weight across both of the South Asian cohorts and the European cohorts. So the key observations here in this first table, which is essentially about characteristics between the baby and the mother that affect the birth weight. So the first thing is that the birth weight and newborn characteristics, this is what you get from the table, that the mean birth weight for full-term babies is ranges from 2.64 kilograms, which is for the South Asian cohort, and then up to 3.52 kilograms, and that's for the European baby cohort. And so that essentially highlights that South Asian babies demonstrate lower birth weights, while the European babies demonstrate higher birth weight averages. The second thing that you can see from this table is the gender differences. So boys are generally larger than the girls. Based on the numbers, those numbers are higher than the the girl numbers, and that the girls show higher skin fold thickness and adiposity. And the third thing that we can see here is that the maternal maternal characteristics, the maternal characteristics, and so the mother's genetics and how that affects the birth weight. And so the maternal prevalence of gestational diabetes mellitus was higher in certain parts of South Asia than others. And so maternal age was also widely varied amongst the cohorts, which you can see here on the table at the very bottom. The second table here is about the identified genetic variants that they saw in their results. So out of 196 single nucleotide polymorphisms, fetal genetic scores were strongly associated with birth weight in the South Asians. But the association between the maternal genetic score did show to be weaker. And overall, the fetal genetic score did show more of an effect on the birth weight, although there were some cohort-specific variations where the maternal genetic scores, the mother's genetics, did show more of an effect, such as the UK Bang cohort, which you can see in the very bottom of the top half of the table. But overall, the association is stronger with the fetal genetic scores. And so the last figure here for the results shows the birth weight differences. And so in this panels A through D show an association of the fetal genetic scores and the maternal genetic scores with the birth weight. And then the panels E and F show the comparison of those same scores with the two cohorts. So if you look across the tables or across the figure, you can see that there's a stronger association of the fetal genetic scores, again, with the birth weight. And also that the maternal genetic scores does demonstrate association, of course, but it is weaker than the association of the fetal scores. So overall, the European cohorts do show similar fetal genetic scores effect on birth weight, but it is slightly less than the effects shown with the South Asian birth weights.
My name is Dorian Winnington Forbes, and I will be presenting the discussion section. The study of Indian and Bangladeshi cohorts reveals a positive relationship between fetal genetic scores, birth weight, and various body birth measurements. In children and adolescents, birth weight was linked to body size, while the maternal genetic scores did not influence body size or cardiometabolic characteristics. Conclusion. The study discovers that despite their smaller size, South Asian newborn, fetal, and maternal genotypic scores have a similar relationship with birth weight. However, South Asian babies typically weigh less at birth than their European counterparts, implying non-genetic variables like maternal health and environmental influence. In addition, the study discovers a connection between specific gene locus and maternal metabolistic traits and early childhood body size.